Have you ever been, literally, lost for words? You hear something unexpected and you just don't know how to reply? You might say you're speechless, dumbstruck, stupefied, stunned or dumbfounded. The English language has many words and phrases to describe that feeling. But have you ever been in a position where you know what you want to say, but the words just won't come out? The words are there in the forefront of your mind, but your lips and your vocal cords just won't engage. Let's talk about selective mutism. We briefly talked about non-speaking people in the first video in this series. But there are plenty of autistic people who speak no differently to anyone else most of the time, sometimes lose the ability to speak. It's called selective mutism, which is kind of misleading. It's anything but a choice. It's not people deciding not to speak when they don't want to. It's a temporary inability to speak. In the aftermath of the First World War, the medical establishment started to take notice of a condition they called shell shock. Soldiers returning from the battlefield, whether physically wounded or not, would sometimes be changed men. Haunted, nervous and lacking their former confidence, many exhibited unusual symptoms such as blindness, deafness or muteness that had no medical explanation. They were physically able to see, hear or speak, but for reasons the doctors couldn't fathom, their brains and their bodies wouldn't connect. All sorts of crude methods were tried to restore the functions these men appeared to have lost, including everything from special diets and medications to punishment and even electric shocks. A silent man who shouted out in pain when electrodes were applied to his jaw was declared to no longer be mute. A century later, with the benefit of hindsight, we now know that those brave men who returned from the terrifying conditions of a senseless war were suffering from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Their inability to connect mind and body was the result of being exposed to horrors most of us couldn't even imagine living through. PTSD is now well known as a consequence of surviving extreme trauma. It's not just soldiers who experience it. All manner of intensely stressful experiences can have the same profound emotional and psychological consequences. Survivors of terror attacks, former hostages, and victims of violent crime are routinely offered counselling in the hope of preventing the onset of PTSD. Beyond being the victim of physical violence, all manner of intensely stressful events and experiences can have the same results. Divorce, bullying, emotional abuse, neglect and being overworked can all cause a person to suffer the effects of PTSD. PTSD is not rare in autistic people, but it's not the reason why many of us sometimes lose our ability to speak. However, there is common ground between post-traumatic stress and selective mutism. If you've any understanding of autism, then you will have heard about or even witnessed autistic meltdowns. If you haven't, or if you'd like to learn more, then there's a useful video that was made as part of the Autism and Relationship series linked on screen now. A meltdown is a reaction to extreme stress, just as PTSD is. But the conditions that lead to a meltdown may seem unfamiliar to people who aren't autistic or who have never experienced one themselves. Although they may appear to happen suddenly, a meltdown is a result of a build-up of stress over minutes, hours, or even days. We can appear untroubled one moment, then explode or collapse the next, with no obvious trigger from an observer's point of view. Non-autistic people can't often relate to the intense pain of sensory overload, the confusion of contradictory demands, our sensitivity to other people's unspoken feelings, or the complexity of multi-layered social contracts. Even the most unremarkable situations, in non-autistic terms, can be minefields of confusion and agonising stimulus for an autist. When it hits boiling point, we melt down. But not all meltdowns are alike. If you've seen autistic meltdowns in cinema and television, or the voyeuristic videos of distressed kids posted by opportunistic parents, then you might expect screaming, lashing out and self-injurious behaviour. That does happen in some cases, but many of us melt down quietly, without drama, without sound. In our community, we think of it as shutting down rather than melting down. We become withdrawn, our movement minimal and stilted, our breathing shallow, and we can lose our ability to speak. It's not uncommon for people to shout at us and prod us, trying to get a reaction, but none will come. Our subconscious minds have taken over and shut us down. We're in self-preservation mode, and nothing other than removal of the cause of our distress will bring us back. Following a meltdown or shutdown, we may remain speechless for hours, days, or even longer. Just like someone might pass out from a blow to the head or from searing pain, our conscious, communicative mind has been locked away in a mental panic room by our inbuilt instincts to survive. Whilst we will almost always regain our powers of speech, there can be long-term consequences for us after being driven to such extreme reactions. The same subconscious mechanisms that protect us during trauma can kick in to prevent trauma in the future. We may find ourselves unable to speak if put into similar situations later, or silent with people who helped cause those traumas. It's not a question of choice. We're not being churlish or selfish. We're not punishing anyone or giving them the silent treatment. Our internal guardian angel, our instinct for self-preservation, has flicked a switch, disengaging our ability to speak, to protect us from repeating the mistakes of old. What if the source of our pain is something we can't escape or hide from? If it's within our schools, our workplaces, or our homes, it may be impossible for us to physically avoid the situation or the person our minds need to protect us from. Our teacher, our boss, our parent or sibling may think we are awkward, unkind, or simply petulant, because in their eyes we refuse to speak to them, when in reality we simply can't. What starts as purely situational, a temporary stress reaction, may become a more permanent affair if we are unable to make our circumstances better. To all intents and purposes, we may simply appear to be non-speaking. If we're trapped with the cause of our pain, then the only hope we have is for the people who have power to change it to work it out and make it right. If they played a personal part in it, they must accept their responsibility and do whatever is necessary to earn our trust and prove to us that they can be relied upon to never hurt us that way again. It won't always be possible, and the longer it's ignored, the harder it will be. Not every autistic person is selectively mute, and not every non-speaking autist is under constant trauma. Some of us will never lose our ability to speak, and the reasons someone may not use speech at all or speak in a way others don't understand are many and varied. When we are unable to speak, though, whether temporarily or permanently, we still know what's going on around us, what is said about us, and what feelings people are projecting. We know if you're reacting to us with anger, frustration, pity, ridicule, or kindness and understanding. Unless you understand that our loss of speech is involuntary and caused by the people or the environment around us, then you cannot help us recover. No amount of cajoling, threats, emotional blackmail, or kind sympathetic words will make us snap out of it. Remove the stimulus that caused our reaction, or help us remove ourselves from it. Think hard about how you might have prevented our meltdown or shutdown, and take steps to ensure it never happens again. Always be ready to prove that you are worthy of the trust that we put in you. Communication is nothing without trust. Thank you for watching. All YouTube channels need subscribers to grow, so please click on the subscription link on the left, or on the right for another video, or visit autistic.com.